Welcome to the UpLevel Podcast, Rasika. Thank you for saying yes to this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Christy.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to be part of your podcast.
Oh, it's been wonderful to witness your journey as of late. There's so much to congratulate you for, and I'm sure it's going to come out as we talk throughout this conversation. And as you know, this season, the context is around right relationship, today's UpLevel. So I want to dive right in by asking you, the listeners have just heard your bio and the world you're operating in and navigating. So how do you define right relationship?
Wow, that is such an important topic and one that's close to my heart. For me, right relationship is a living, breathing thing. It grows, evolves, and it weathers life's ups and downs. And, there remains a continuous shared sense of purpose, a deep connection. For me, right relationship involves access and agency. Mm-hmm. Do we get each other? Can we truly be ourselves? And I think of it like a ladder. Each rung represents a deeper level of trust. It starts with psychological safety, showing up with curiosity, empathy, and then comes really the intentionality, the willingness to commit, recommit, to stay in it.
Wow. And I just got shivers because the words that you're saying, I know you live. I know you live this. You honor this definition that you just shared with us. It's profound and beautiful. You honor it in all the relationships in your world. And yeah, what do you want to say about honoring this definition in your relationships?
Oh my goodness. It's so core to who I am and, goes way back to my upbringing as a child. And when I think of right relationship, I think of my father. And I would love to share a story which came up for me as I was thinking of this topic. My father is an educator and he has an incredible knack for connecting with people. And he taught me of the power of right relationship as a tool for learning. It's a very interesting concept about leveraging the relationships for learning. Whenever I had questions back in the day, he wouldn't just give me an answer. He used to connect me to an expert, another coworker, a fellow teacher, an artist. It could be anybody.
Wow.
And just to connect with them, to speak to them, to learn from them. It just really taught me how we can sort of gather those learnings around us. And and interestingly, these conversations with the people became a foundation for my newfound relationship with these people. Right. Yeah. People I cherish and they live in me. There are beautiful memories and, I seek advice from me and they're still hold close to my heart.
That's so beautiful. And it makes me think about, I've talked to you in other contexts about spiritual psychology. And the premise of this is that everything's for the learning, like that life is a curriculum. And so when I hear you say this wisdom that your father passed on, that relationships are for learning. And I really love that. I really love that perspective versus relationships are places where I get my needs met. It's a really important distinction, I think, especially in the times that we're living through, because we're seeing, as we've talked about, increased polarization. I think just people are so worn out and they're tired. And so they're like trying to get their needs met. But if we can shift our perspective, why is this person here in front of me? Like, what am I meant to be learning by either the challenge of navigating this relationship or the joy of being in this relationship?
Absolutely. It is the pure, the connection that kind of starts to simmer and then sits, brews into new discoveries. And it grows into so many twists and turns. I like to think of it, as a river. It flows. And there could be ups and downs, highs and lows. There are moments where some of my strongest relationships, I haven't seen them for a while, but they are in the thoughts. we continue across our workplace. We have our phone of friends, right? Like, just what do you think? What am I missing? It's incredible to just learn, then just make it all about who's right or what am I getting out of it.
Yes to that. And when I look at your journey and a purpose that you've really stepped into from your lived experience, which is to serve immigrant women who are in massive moves to a new country, shifting in their career while doing significant caretaking responsibilities. Talk about components of relationship in so many areas. What can you tell us about right relationship in that context?
It is the foundation, the fabric of our communities, right? And when we relocate, we move into an entirely, or when we embrace change, it yet again becomes a tool to take us through. And there's a huge difference in suffering together and suffering in silos.
Ooh, suffering together or suffering in silos. Yes to that.
My own experience, I relocated internationally. I moved to the US for work, and it was a profound experience. And it's like an example of neuroplasticity at its best. You know, it's a crash course to learning new things, to adapting, and just on all fronts. So I just want to share a little bit about that, because it was like it's not just about starting a new job, but starting a whole new life. And I was relocating within the same company. These are people I have met online digitally. And now I'm coming in and working among them, the same physical space, and the dynamic shifts.
Wow.
But more than that, landing in a new country, surrounded by unfamiliar faces, leaving behind some of those strongest connections, which I'm still trying to let go of. And then even like little things like getting a car seat at the airport, right? Like just navigating public transport, settling down here, lots of logistics. And we'll really get through it, adapt, and learn new ways of problem solving. The hardest is the unspoken rules, the social nuances, not the social anxiety part of it. Like, how do we strike a conversation at the micro kitchen? What's important? How do we participate in a trivia, which is talking about popular culture, which we may not know so much about? Little things that matter so much. And I think back, and I've been so privileged to have my allies, my friends, community members, leaders who really offered a helping hand. There were colleagues who guided me through the campus. Don't think about work today. Let's just go figure out where the ice cream shop is, or, all of these different things. Wow. I look back and I think I couldn't have done it without the people around me.
Well, and there's people every day in your situation who are immigrating to a new country, a new culture. And what is your guidance? And in the context of like being in right relationship, what's the guidance through that lens?
Well, as we are integrating in different systems, there's the responsibility both ways.
Yes.
On the self to lean in and make an effort, a leap of faith, a trust to be there, to show up. And then there's a responsibility on the organization to really create conditions where these strong connections are forming. And thriving. When I moved in, one of the most powerful and helpful things was when my leaders said, well, take time to settle down. There was a lot going on. You take care of yourself. Your family works here. It's not going anywhere. And then when you're ready, we would love to learn from you. And that is an invitation to be here, because we are all coming in with new experiences and as much as there is pressure to learn and adapt, there is also the organization or the space learning from anyone who's integrating into it. So giving permission to do that, we often forget that when we think about transitions or making career shifts or joining a new organization, it's a lot of pressure on the individual to learn. But what about the organization to have that invitation to create moments of belonging, to say, here are some of the people you can connect with and learn from.
Beautiful. And again, thinking it through the context of right relationship, permission and invitations. Feels like these are some of the operating principles in any context. Like, what's the permission that would serve folks to be in wholeness, to bring their full self? What's the invitation to create that type of environment? And permission to be while we are in these moments of transition. Not many organizations are there yet. They're, this is why we're having this conversation, and you're the person I wanted to talk about it, because as the world becomes more global, technology becomes more of the way that we run our businesses, our companies, these types of things are going to be so important. And also integrating folks who we don't actually get to physically see. Right. Yep. There's been a lot of information around proximity bias as of late. So yeah, what other tidbits do you have for us or for those listening responsible inside their organizations to create right relationship with folks moving across the org, across the systems?
I think particularly thinking about women and the disproportionate, amount of caregiving responsibilities and a whole lot of, and having to represent ourselves at work. It's so important. So understanding that experience and creating a condition where we're able to come in, thinking about the entire experience, there are career breaks. There are career complete relaunches, complete revamp, shifting paths. There is, and then starting new career paths in a new country. I have friends who are highly educated, came in with, were very talented, and they find themselves in a new country. And as they have most of the caregiving support or for their family support and navigating the whole immigration system, are now finding different pivots, different ways to integrate and find their own path and space and purpose. So here, the right relationships, either through mentorship, coaching, or even organizations are essentially spaces where people are coming together, and these relationships go beyond the organization in itself. Investing in it really can create such a long-term impact.
Well, let's talk about a little bit more about how coaching, leadership development, this is all your wheelhouse, and how can coaching skills and a focus on developing leaders support people and support organizations to create conditions for right relationship?
Yeah, it's such a strong link between leadership and relationships, right? Like to lead, we first need to relate. And leadership is not just about influencing others. It's about representing. To represent effectively, leaders really need to understand the people, the background, the experiences. And in the context of coaching, the thing I love most about coaching is it provides that platform for such personalized way to learn about each other. And that learning serves as a foundation to support each other and lift us together. So really, I think leaders are navigating such unprecedented times. Stakes are high, and collaboration is quintessential at every workplace, at every organization. We need more representation so that they can, there is voice from the top speaking about and standing up for that experience and to create those conditions for the right relationships and what it can do to help people succeed. But it's also about collaborating right at the top. We can't just expect our individual contributors, our mid-management to collaborate when right at the top, our leaders, are not talking to each other. That is so, so important. And for collaboration, we need to have the strongest relationships. And that comes with communication, authenticity, being vulnerable. All of these kind of become ingredients for a really strong relationship. What do you think?
Oh, I love that. So vulnerability, authenticity, and communication. These are ingredients for right relationship. So
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about when we are working cross-culturally and different cultures would experience communication, authenticity, vulnerability in different ways. What's your guidance for how we navigate that and have the sensitivity for how different cultures would embody, if you will, those qualities of communication, authenticity, and vulnerability?
Yeah, when we think of different cultures, having experienced and having worked together with so many different cultures across Asia Pacific and our, all different offices, it's interesting to be in it, right? Relationships in India, for instance, the lines are a little bit blurred between your personal relationships and your work relationships. We invite our coworkers to birthday parties and family events, and we go out to eat. When we have visitors coming in, we invite them to, experience food with us or the general cultural experience in itself. And when I traveled across APAC, I was in Beijing working with a few other coworkers, and they invited me for dinner together, and I got to experience the food together with them. It's the hospitality part of it that really comes up and creates sort of an initiator of connections. It is beautiful to learn together outside of work, just the work context, but just understanding each other and our cultures. And then, looking at the more Western setting, I think the personal space is important. Right. So there is a little bit of a kind of preserving that space and relationship within that. But there is also something great, which is the ability to articulate directly what the needs are to preserve the relationship. So the boundaries in a relationship is something I've learned more so after, moving here. And that's interesting because that's such a solid ingredient for right relationship as well. When I look at all different cultures, however, I feel like there's a core fundamental piece which keeps us all together. That's universality, the language of love, the language of respect, the language of authenticity that cuts through. How we show the channel might be different, but it's there. And how do we learn about each other to be able to tap into that core?
I think that's
interesting.
It's so interesting. It's so beautiful. It's poignant. It's like, okay, so tuning in to what might really resonate for a different culture and acknowledging that. So if you're in India and the custom is let's invite the person over for dinner, it's really embracing that maybe as a Westerner where you might say, oh, I'm having a boundary between my work life and my personal life, but embrace it because you're in this new culture. And so there's this sensitivity that's required, I believe, to be in right relationship. It's just tuning in to these nuances. And can we be flexible enough as human beings to be like, okay, I'm going to try this because I'm in another space right now. and this is the norm or the custom here, and I want to be respectful and honor that. And then, communicating your needs within that. So it goes back to what you're saying, communication, vulnerability, which communicating our needs is vulnerable. It's also authentic. So I really love that. What have you, because you've gone through this, like what has been your biggest aha in navigating this?
Well, for me, I'll just speak from what I have learned about relationships. And that's not just about navigating cultures, but at any new setting or trying to integrate myself or learn more about, sometimes the most important relationship is the one that we have with ourselves.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So I needed to fix that to be able to then integrate into, and learn and form more relationships. So for me, really a pivotal moment was recognizing my own behaviors and triggers and, my own tendencies to avoid confrontation, to prioritize others' needs over mine, people pleasing tendencies, if you will, and growing up, I think the culture I come from, being the good child, often really meant putting, my own needs aside to maintain harmony, to avoid confrontation. And that's how I grew up. And it blows my mind to think about, how we spend a lifetime growing up in a certain way. And then we realize these are actually not honoring our values.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that and for your vulnerability in sharing that. And I'm curious about, like, as you came into the Western culture, because this kind of notion of personal development and, improving ourselves and getting to know ourselves or where we get in our own way has been like a Western thing. And I'm wondering, like, what has it been like for you culturally to navigate that?
It takes a while. It took me a while, so really fast forward to today, after so much coaching and time and space to allow myself to grow, to observe, to learn. The realization is, really about where is the need for external validation, or where is this stemming from? And to understand that in a non-judgmental way, that is part of who I have been. That's part of what I have seen for generations. And now coming into a setting where I have permission to prioritize my own needs, to articulate. And it's actually seen as boundary setting can be a love language, and it's highly encouraged, right? Clear as kind. And I have learned that so much after my shift to the US and having worked here clearly. And the way to think about this for me has been, it takes focus away. When we think too much about really, how are we showing up or worried about the confrontation, that takes focus away from the purpose that we are set up to do. So really understanding, that our worth is inherent. It's not about pleasing others or avoiding confrontation. It's about showing up authentically, standing up for what we believe. And all of that has come from moments of self-awareness.
Wow. You've really been a love warrior in transforming yourself from the inside out. What's it been like to go on this journey, take yourself on this journey?
I'm always, I'm an avid learner. New things inspire me. And I feel like a kid in a candy store. But learning this stuff about letting go of a part of you and embracing different ways is hard. So but something that I have started doing more intentionally is really being more aware and checking in with myself around where is it that what are some triggers that I'm holding? How am I responding? We talk a lot about this in coactive, which is checking in with our own body or mind and staying in that moment, which is the in-between space for a while before we move on and remind ourselves gently about what am I wanting?
Mm-hmm.
What experience I'm looking to create and what would get me there. So really shifting from judgments to progress. And I see that so much as an HR professional, interpersonal conflict, the leadership decisions, resilience, feeding it into burnout among relationships. Like it's there, but it stems from jumping into conclusions, jumping into assumptions, and not taking a moment to really slow down and question what paradigm are we coming from? What are we missing? What blind spots are we holding?
So powerful. A very important ingredient of right relationship. You heard it from Rasika first, is relationship to self. Relationship to self, being in right relationship to self, and having the courage like you have to look at the parts of ourselves where we might be standing in the way of right relationship to self, to others, to projects, to our purpose, to our community, our family systems. And we know that takes great courage. It takes great courage to do that work. And because of the times we're living through, it almost feels like it's a non-negotiable. Like if folks choose not to have these moments of self-reflection and pause and to kind of go through an iterative process of finding your better self, if you will. Like
Absolutely.
what will happen? Like where will we be left?
Well, we're at a moment where there's technology is going through massive evolution, right, with AI. And, I like to think of it as parent teaching a child.
Yes.
And we hold responsibility to preserve that humanness. What makes us human? Just simple examples when you're teaching a tool to learn languages. What about that we know that's so deep rooted in human nature? And how do we translate that? And for that, we need to have that commitment to preserving our relationships to one another, our responsibility towards one another as a larger universal community. So that it makes it so important more than ever for us, especially in this moment where work is so interconnected than ever. Teams are collaborating far and wide, and our impact is showing up across the board. It's so important to have open space for diverse perspectives. What are we missing? What perspectives have we not heard? Who's left behind? Who's unheard? These questions are more important than ever at all platforms.
Another ingredient of right relationship. It's like, what are all the perspectives that are important to hold as we look at this topic, situation, challenge?
Yeah.
And really, this notion that we are all interconnected, interrelated. And so why wouldn't we ensure that the different perspectives are heard because of the interrelationship and the interconnectedness?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, go for it. What are you going to say?
I was just thinking it's like, when we think of just the entire, we think of a journey, a flight.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking flight. We not just need to ensure that the flight takes off, but the journey is safe. The landing smooth.
Yes.
It cruises.
Yes.
Where it's up in the air to high altitudes, and it's like all components of it.
Yes.
And really the foundation needs to feel safe. And for all. It's important to create those conditions for inclusive spaces where unheard voices feel comfortable speaking up and forming allies. That has a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm. How do organizations create the conditions of inclusive spaces so all voices feel safe to be heard?
Yeah. I think articulating that is first most important. It's our responsibility doesn't just stop by including a diverse group of people into the mix, but then helping them settle down. That's why I kind of started talking about taking care of transitions and integration. It's so, so important to help form those right relationships to create the norm,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to talk about it, to articulate it. And my coaching conversations, self-doubt and not feeling included comes up quite a bit, the sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And, thinking about organization, be it career progression, leadership,
mm-hmm.
business goals, and the effectiveness of our business mission all lies on relationships. If we don't have access to those strong relationships, it's harder to navigate.
Yes, to that. If we don't have access to strong relationship or the ability to navigate and create strong relationship, it's going to impact the bottom line. Of course, it's going to impact the culture and the engagement levels. It's going to impact people's ability to innovate and be creative. I mean, it's really at the core, isn't it?
Yep.
It's really at the core.
Yeah, really, it is at the core, and it needs to be cultivated and it needs to be prioritized. These are skills. The right relationships can be replicated by machine. Maybe it can to some extent, but we're sort of setting the norm for it. Empathy, ability to connect heart to heart. And it's more than ever that our leaders need to role model that.
Yes. One of my favorite tools in the coactive metasphere is the designed alliance. And I feel whenever we train inside an organization, we'll often say this concept alone, if everybody could get trained consistently and well in how to have basically design a conscious relationship. What will bring out the best in each other? How will we be with each other when things go sideways? Because there will be challenges. How do you like to receive feedback? Design me, if you're the people manager, design me as your best leader, coach, champion. What's important for us to know and voice about our social identity? What are the power dynamics that are unspoken here that let's put some, transparency around that. If more and more organizations taught folks how to have those conversations, people are going to hear me say this like a million times with every guest. I believe that is going to be such a game changer for creating an organization that's thriving. It's beyond survival. It's thriving because people are in right relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And you bring up something so important. Leaders who are able to genuinely show interest in the people as individuals, really learn from them. That, the intent to learn the curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much power and courage in it. I was talking to a leader recently, and and this has come up several times. And in our conversation, she said, "Wow, I just realized I failed because I did the job when I had amazing team of people who could have done it in their ways, and I didn't listen to them." And that to me is amazing example to be able to stand up and say, yes, I failed. Permission to fail, to role model right at the top. And so my response was, that is amazing. What are we going to do to celebrate?
Yeah.
And the response was, I'm going to share with them what I learned, and we will make that as part of our contracting, our team norm, and give them permission to call me out on that whenever I do that. And that I thought was so powerful, because that has such a beautiful ripple effect to the rest of the leadership team.
So much. It goes back to those 3 ingredients that you've taught us: communication, vulnerability, authenticity. Right? That's a beautiful story of a leader representing that. And it gives others, we talked about permission and invitation. It gives them the permission to make mistakes, to celebrate it, and an invitation to create more of a learning environment versus a punitive, where we're robotic and we've left our humanity outside of the workspace, which we are a stand for, right, Rasika? There's no more time for that. We're bringing humanity into the workplace, and being in right relationship is one way we do that.
Yes. And humanity is all about, learning. There is finding new discoveries, opening new doors, choosing new paths, being clear, communicating the path I want to go through that door and where we want to lead towards. Like, I think of that analogy, when we give permission, invitation, that is almost like giving access to a newfound pathway. Mm-hmm. And we can define what that pathway needs to look like: a human-centered, pathway together, a human-centered journey.
If you were to ask Rasika, like young Rasika, like the little version of you, if she could see you now and the life you've created, the journey you've gone on, and the ripple effect that your courage is creating in your workspace, in your community, in your family, what would little Rasika say to you today?
We need more of that. we need to do it. We need to learn this early in life. And one of the reasons I'm really committed to code, and that allows me to do what I could have benefited from at a difficult time. And, it was there in some form, but I've found a language to be able to articulate that. Lessons learned around setting boundaries and how it actually is a service, not a disservice. Some of these new lessons, I think it's so, so important. So little Rasika is going to say thank you to me, and we need more of this work. And I want to say thank you to you for talking about such an important topic: authentic relationships. That's how we stay human, and we kind of preserve what's core to us.
Thank you, Rasika. When I was thinking about this season, I kept seeing your face. I knew you were meant to be part of this conversation, because you're such a model of right relationship in every context that you're living in. And there's a lot more wisdom from you to be shared, but in like a kind of a final synthesis, what is your final words for now that you want to leave our listeners with in this context of right relationship, today's UpLevel?
Don't be afraid to explore new relationships. These are opportunities for growth, discovery, and we all have the power to shape the path of our relationships, to co-create a journey that's meaningful, that's shared experiences, and that's fulfilling to our lives.
Thank you for being with us, Rasika.
Of course, it was a pleasure, Christy.